Can you tell how many people will join?
We're broadcasting now.
That's right.
Yeah, I would be able to actually. Um, all of the presentations are on here, right?
On where?
On the website, on the Google Drive.
Yes. We've just got a new one from the Inter-American Development Bank. Let me make sure that's copied.
I enjoyed our interaction. Excellent. Very good passage. Excellent. I know that young granddaughters. You did. He's incredibly knowledgeable. Unbelievably thorough to work with. One of those benefits. I think he really found the very good. Going for another.
I can't get it going yet. So are you doing that?
Yeah.
Good morning to all of you. Welcome to Berners Street and to the fourth edition of the Consultative Forum on Coffee Finance. As you know, this coffee forum is the baby of the 2007 International Coffee Agreement. It is the forum that we chose to bring together not only the representatives of the coffee producers, the coffee trading, but also the multilateral institutions to help us to shape a better future for coffee. At the 3 previous meetings of the forum, we have covered topics such as the challenges for small and medium-sized producers in managing the risk of green coffee price volatility, the role that producer associations, governments, and or other entities play in making risk management and financing tool more accessible and more workable for small and medium-sized growers and the benefits of aggregation. In its fourth iteration of the event, the ICO is focused on gathering representatives of coffee-producing countries and funding agents from around the globe to enable discussion and inspire cooperation. Our main goal is to discuss these challenges faced by our coffee farmers and develop plans to tackle these issues together. The coffee industry is going through changing and unpredictable times. For farmers who depend on their crops to survive, this can potentially threaten their ability to continue running their farms, sending their children to school, and puts food on the table. 10 years ago, we had one of the greatest crises in coffee history, as prices were at their lowest levels in decades. Today, the panorama has changed radically. Instead of a surplus of supply over demand, we are heading into a global supply deficit. And while it is imperative for coffee producing and consuming countries not to lose sight of the need of global balance, we must keep in mind that the free market is inherently unstable. The recurring market volatility continues to be a destabilizing factor that makes financial planning and risk management difficult for farmers to achieve. But there is hope, and it's our responsibility as the representatives of the producers and the multilateral institutions to do everything in our power to increase their access to tools they need to run productive farming enterprises. On behalf of our members and our staff, I want to thank the representatives of the various bilateral, multilateral, private and public institutions who have traveled to London to meet with the delegates of our coffee producing countries and the members of the ICO. I truly believe that the conversations we will have at this fourth forum will guide us on a path towards bridging the gap between farmers and finance. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edie. Good morning to everybody. And during the briefing meeting, I had the chance to welcome and thank our panelists and representatives of the different organizations. I want to do it again. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your interest. And for many of you, thank you for flying for many hours to be able to join here the ICO meeting and the fourth forum. The purpose of this event, as we have discussed before, is to establish a direct dialogue with multilateral and bilateral institutions, donors, and social lenders to discuss and implement concrete plans for poverty alleviation and wealth creation in rural communities which depend on coffee production. The program, in terms of reference, were circulated as document ED 2183 14 revision 2. Also, the programs and biographies, background documents for the meeting, including the institutional profiles, you'll be able to find them electronically in the fourth forum page on the website. You just go to the ICO.org and find the forum, and you will find all the documents there. Copies of the presentations will be posted on the website once they have been presented here. Some practical arrangements. There will be a short coffee break midway through the morning, and lunch will be served at 1 p.m. Also, coffee is available the whole morning, all the time out there with cookies and biscuits. As for seating, during the short coffee break after the presentations by the multilateral institutions, arrangements will be redone for the seating, and panelists should be sitting on the podium for the panel in the morning and the panel in the afternoon. So thank you very much for the delegates who usually sit in the first row because of the rearranging. We had to reorganize everything, and we'll be reorganizing as the day evolves, and you will get instructions on how things are being made. We don't have much time, unfortunately. We only have one day. So during the discussions following to the presentations, members and presenters should keep their interventions to 3 to 4 minutes at the most, to keep to be able to have as much interaction as possible. Keep in mind that the event is being webcast. Any question on this regard, any question on logistical regard, you have Vicente Partida, who is sitting there, raising his hand, and we have a couple of interns. Eugenia is there, and there they are. So any questions you may have, anything that you need, they will be available for you. If you prefer, if you at some point you want to have some written questions given to the panelists, just give them to us, and we can deliver them, and they will be answered to you. One of the most important parts of this meeting today is what we call the networking. A big part of the purpose of this session, of this forum, is for the countries and the members to be able to sit down, network, exchange impressions, open a dialogue with the different institutions that are present here. The reason why they are here is because they are all interested in what you have to say. So I encourage you to say it and to sit down and talk to all the institutions that you think would be interesting for the country or the association you're representing. The networking will take place in the council lounge. There are 3 hours for informal networking, and in the first floor. And you can basically do it anywhere via ICO. I mean, this is the instruction I'm giving. I'm more formal than that, but basically, wherever you want to sit down and have a conversation, open the dialogue, you're more than welcome to do it, and you're more than welcome to ask the support of any member of the ICO or myself, and we're more than happy to do it. Also, during the coffee breaks, of course, you're more than invited to talk to the different institutions. Some of the institutions are staying here for a couple more days during the sessions of the council, so you're more than welcome. You will be able to discuss with them the project or the issues that you want to discuss. I want to encourage you to keep brief notes of all the meetings that you have, of all the discussions that you have. One of the things that we want to do, this is the first part of the project that the ICO expects becomes a more, go over the years. The ICO is working on becoming a facilitator for its members in the dialogue with the different institutions present here and some others. So there will be a survey sent to all the members where you can tell us what you liked, what was useful, and where we can improve, and how this can be done in a better way. As noted in document ED 2183-14, provision 1, members are invited to bring the following information to the one-on-one meetings to inform initial discussions, and to include people who are directly involved in coffee sector financing in the delegations to make the most out of these opportunities. One thing would be, of course, exchange of contact details and business cards, information about or examples of priority areas and projects for funding and future support in the coffee sector, to enable producers to outline their coffee needs, information about projects and proposals requiring financing, copies of relevant project documentation if you have it here, and proposals requiring financing, again, if you have it here. In the case of institutions, members will be interested in how can members access your services. Part of the questions we've gotten for producing countries mostly is, how do I open the dialogue with the different institutions, with the lenders, with the multilateral financial institutions? Who do I have to talk to? What's the procedure? And partly what the ICO is doing is not just open this dialogue, but also support the countries in given the case, helping them structure whatever dialogue or project has to be will be discussed with the different institutions. Final couple of logistical comments is one, be aware that there's interpretation here. Channel 1 is English, 2 French, 3 Spanish, and 4 is Portuguese. I request, as I did this morning and do it again for everybody, if you speak, please speak slowly. Again, don't follow my example. Just speak slowly. And because interpreters cannot follow you, then it will be possible to keep everybody engaged in the dialogue. That's very important. Remember to turn on the microphone before talking, and remember to switch it off after talking. For presenters, remember to face the podium when you are talking. Remember, this is being webcast, so they need to be able to see you, same as the audience. So thank you very much, and let's start. Our first presenter is Roy Palisat. Roy is from the World Bank, and he's going to be make a presentation showing the activities of the World Bank and the IFC across the public and private sectors in coffee-producing countries. So we have Roy from World Bank and Panos Varangis from the Panos here?
Slight change. What we're doing is talking about the joint report the World Bank is working on with the ICO, and later on my colleagues Panos and Mona will talk about the World Bank's work in coffee and the IFC's work in coffee. I'll keep this short because I know that everyone's much more interested to hear from the lending institutions about what they're doing to support projects and programs in the coffee sectors in developing countries. My focus here is the work we're currently undertaking as the World Bank's Global Agricultural Practice to work with the ICO to identify how finance can be improved in terms of provision both to smallholder farmers but also to the rest of the sector through the interrelationship with improvements in risk management. Often when people talk about the shortfall of finance to the coffee sector, we forget to think about why that is the case. And a big chunk of this is the fact that often in the coffee sector there are a significant amount of risks facing the sector, and those risks are not effectively managed, thereby meaning that the lending institutions struggle to lend effectively into that sector. As such, the piece of work that we're working on in conjunction with the ICO and its membership is a global publication that will consider and look at case studies that show how risk management improvements and improvements in risk within the coffee sector at all stages of the supply chain can actually facilitate the provision of finance to the sector. We've been very fortunate to be able to fund this piece of work through the multi-donor trust fund given to the World Bank by Swiss Cooperation and the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is a trust fund focused on improvements in agricultural risk management, and they've been very kind to fund and facilitate this work. The team I work for in the World Bank is known as the Agricultural Finance and Risk Management Team, and it's no coincidence that we've linked agricultural finance and agricultural risk management, as we're seeing clearly when we do our work that the two areas are intertwined, and you cannot see an expansion of finance to the sector without an improvement in the management of risk, and vice versa. If you don't have access to finance for participants in an agricultural value chain, you will not see the ability of those participants to invest in technology, processes, procedures, and activities that reduce risks. So it's a kind of vicious cycle that lack of finance often leads to lack of improvement in risk management, and lack of improvements in risk management prevent people from borrowing sufficient levels of finance. The reason for writing this report is to try and take a series of case studies, and in the draft report we've produced, there are 21 of these, looking at specific interventions that have been taken in coffee communities to both improve access to finance and to improve risk management, and look at what's worked and, even more importantly, what hasn't worked. The goal being to try and make sure that there's a global body of knowledge that people can draw from. Often we've learned from talking to different ICO members that a program in one country is often not known about in another country. So people don't know what works and also don't know what doesn't work. Our goal is to try and expand that kind of global piece of knowledge so that people know what they might try and what might have results so that they can try and improve those interrelations. Another part of the underlying cause for this work, or the rationale behind it, is to try and educate lenders. What we've learned from many interactions with the lending community is that the banks in coffee-producing countries have a terrible fear of coffee or lending into the coffee sector. And often that's been based on a very bad history. I mean, one thinks of what happened after Hurricane Mitch in Honduras, where banks were told, your loans are no longer going to be repaid, we have a period of debt forgiveness. And that led to obviously a chronic withdrawal of lending from the sector. Unfortunately, even when situations have improved and risks have improved on the ground in countries, banks remain very unwilling to lend because they don't understand how to quantify risks in the sector. And a number of the cases we draw upon look at this from that perspective too, which is how can banks understand risk and how can they actually understand how to quantify it and start lending where the risk is acceptable and manageable. As such, the report that we will be publishing shortly looks at both two sides of this. What can the coffee sector do to improve its access to finance? And also, what can the banks do to improve their ability to lend to this sector? Often we also forget to think about banks are always looking for new markets to lend into. Lending to the urban centres in developing countries has been a very profitable sector, but is becoming increasingly difficult. As such, if you're looking for an area to grow as a lending institution, you need to start looking at areas that are underlent. And coffee and agriculture fit that picture. The challenge is, how can you do it sustainably? In addition, some of the reports that we've examined show that we shouldn't just focus on smallholders and their access to finance, but also understand the entire value chain. Smallholders are not the only participants in the coffee sector that face challenges. Often domestic collectors, domestic processors, and domestic traders often face substantial challenges in terms of accessing finance that restrict their efficiency and reduce their ability to operate effectively. As such, if we want to see a vibrant coffee sector, we have to actually look at the challenges at all sectors of the supply chain and see how we can facilitate that finance. The report I'm talking about is not yet published. We have a meeting on Thursday here with the consultative group that will actually be the peer review body that will look at the report and approve publication or suggest alterations. However, we hope to have the report published by the end of November, and we'll be using the ICO membership to disseminate that report widely and also think about different means of technology to share it across the coffee sector and across the lending world. We'll be looking at different web platforms, Wikipedia type processes, and also webinars and other kinds of mechanisms. So it's more than just producing a document that no one ever reads. And I have to say, we've all produced many of those over time, but it's to produce case studies that people can actually utilize. It will enable the sharing of global best practice, and we will reach out as globally as possible using coffee experts to publish and publicize this work. In terms of the key learnings that this report has generated and gathered, it's pretty clear to us that our hypothesis is that risk and access to finance go hand in hand. And if we ignore one or the other, we cannot achieve the other. As such, it is vital to focus on improvements in risk management if we want to see subsequent improvements in finance. Where risk management is applied, we've also seen that often it's not applied very well. And a failure to implement risk mitigation and risk management measures will always lead to lenders being more reluctant to lend. An interesting thing that's often overlooked as well is the types of finance that are available. There is a profusion of credit for short-term purposes. Most producers can find post-harvest finance, whether it's from the bank or the informal sector. Most traders can also find collection finance. What people struggle more and more with is long-term finance for investment. And investment is critical in improving risk management. As such, many of the cases we look at address this question. How can we lend longer term? How can financial institutions, domestic banks, lend longer term, but in a sustainable manner? Move away from only lending in the short term to lending in the longer term. And this will have a virtuous cycle where improvements in longer term availability of finance will generally result in improvements to the coffee sector in terms of efficiency and risk management and profitability. What we've also seen very clearly, and this should be no surprise, is that at the farmer level, at the smallholder level, banks are rarely involved in lending. While there are MFIs, while there are informal institutions, commercial banks don't generally, due to transaction costs and due to the perceptions of risk, want to lend to those smallholders. As such, it's vital to find a mechanism that allows the banks in a way that also reaches down to the smallholder. We've seen over the years, program after program, looking at how aggregation of taking farmers and smallholders, putting them into associations and cooperatives, can be very effective at improving access to finance. However, we've also seen a number of examples of where, if not done well and not done effectively, we'll see the exact opposite, where weak cooperatives and weak associations lead to borrowing followed by default. So when we think about the case studies that we've gathered, we've reached out far and wide, and on the risk side, we've identified some very clear examples of where government has a role to play, specifically in improving the enabling environment. And by enabling environment, we mean the rules of the game. What does the government do to support the coffee sector through laws, through regulations, through national bodies? And what seems to be the indication is that government can play both a supportive but also a very challenging role if interventions are not done well. And we do a very interesting case study of East Africa that compares the productivity and success of different East African countries and looks at the enabling environments supported by those governments. In terms of market sector risks, obviously price risk is a fundamental issue to all elements of the supply chain. And we see some examples where different agencies and different bodies have worked very cooperatively to put in place mechanisms to improve the management of price risk. There's a great example from TechnoServe in Rwanda, where the use of mobile text messaging from collection stations, washing stations, to the exporter enables hedging to take place in forward selling, locking out risk and reducing problems, which has subsequently led to an improvement in the financing of that coffee supply chain. Additionally, we see some examples of where key coffee buyers have used their professional management skills to support their cooperatives and their suppliers in managing price risk. There's a great example from Sustainable Harvest, based in America, where they use call options and train up their suppliers to utilize those services to avoid the issue of locking in prices and subsequently defaulting if prices rise. On the other side, we consider finance and look at what can be done by the coffee sector participants and by the banks to increase their access to finance. There's a good example from Honduras with the ComRural project, where productive partnerships supported through government grants can actually see a significant rise in bank lending supported by that matching grant program. It's a role for government in terms of crowding in private sector finance. And on the other side, and we'll hear more about this afternoon, we look at the case of Root Capital, who actually have a very collaborative approach using a tripartite lending model to enable export contracts to be financed in an innovative way. Our main conclusion from the report, however, and the most interesting theme, is that the most sustainable means of improving risk management and improving access to finance is through collaboration between the value chain actors. Looking at the relationship between all of the actors within a value chain, from the producers at origin to the buyers and the retailers at consuming locations, and understanding how they can mutually support themselves, and by locking in access to their product, also reduce risk and increase the availability of finance. And we look at a very interesting case study from Olam in Côte d'Ivoire, where their partnership with producer organizations, their investments in technical assistance and good agricultural practices, and their support for farmers who are building up their assets with processing equipment, have enabled a significant improvement in both quality and production, and shows that those collaborative relationships along the supply chain can have real value in terms of increasing access to finance, but also in terms of reducing risk. Having a win for the farmers, a win for the collectors, a win for the processors, a win for the traders, and ultimately securing the supply of high quality coffee to the retailers. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned earlier, we will be having on Thursday a consultative forum group to actually review the report and decide whether it's fit for publication. Assuming that is the case, by November that report will be published and disseminated in partnership between the World Bank and the ICO. And we're hoping that going forward, we'll use technology and innovative approaches such as webinars, forums, blogs, to get as many case studies out to the network as possible, and also encourage others to share cases that haven't been collected to date. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy. We just skipped one little thing before Roy, and which was Mr. Mauricio Galindo's overview of the ICO, which is he's going to make in 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be very brief, in fact. We have a very tight agenda. I would just wanted to give a sense of perspective of the forum, especially for all those who have never been here before and might be wondering what is this about. And I guess the important thing is to understand the evolution of the forum now in its fourth version. The forum, as the executive director, started in 2010, and the idea, of course, has been to tackle this much needed issue of risk management and access to finance by small and medium-sized coffee farmers. And there has been an evolution in the way the forum has been developed, leading to where we are now. So the first forum had a more theoretical approach, if you like, focusing on green coffee volatility and risk management, which was a very useful exercise, and we had excellent presenters. You can always go back to the ICO website and find all the presentations and all the stuff and everything that was done then. And that then led to the next year to ask what is then the role of producer associations and governments in securing, in making available those tools for farmers. So we had a very interesting conversation during a whole day as well. And then that led to last year's forum, which took place in Brazil with Horizonte during the festivities of the 50th anniversary of this organization, where the topic of aggregation was then tackled. And that is, there's understanding that, of course, for the small farmer, accessing these tools in risk management and general financing are sometimes completely off limits. So we identified that if we looked into the forces that help or constrain aggregation, we could also bring in more knowledge and a greater understanding of how to help those farmers to go, not necessarily, but obviously along the lines of cooperatives and other types of organizations that allow them as a group to have more bargaining power, but also to be able to put together the architecture that allows for those tools to be used. So there's an evolution here. There is a conceptual, if you like, alignment that leads to where we are today. So today we have the great pleasure, of course, to have here international development banks, the World Bank, social lenders, foundations, and bilateral agencies, together with ICO members. ICO members that represent the quasi-totality of coffee production in the world, and also some of the most important consumers, that are under one roof, and we'll have a day of discussions, of a day hopefully of networking, because as we know in these meetings, more or half of what happens up yet during the coffee break. So we actually wanted to somehow institutionalize that and allow the space for you, the ICO members, and obviously our panelists, and as well all those who are attending, to have the chance to have this already explained by the chairman and the director, to have the chance to interact in a very lively and hopefully active way to make the most out of this forum. So with that in view, and without much further delay, I would like to continue with our program for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a short announcement that we are going to have a coordination meeting of the producers and the consumers at 12 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think our next presenter is now the World Bank Group. We'd like the Panos Varangis, to pronounce it well, and Monasur come to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invitation. I would really like to start by introducing briefly what is IFC. The International Finance Corporation, or IFC, is the private sector arm of the World Bank, and our mission is to support the development of private sector companies in emerging markets. We mainly work with financing. We provide financing, long and short-term financing. We provide also technical assistance, and we do that in partnership with other international organizations and also specialized technical assistance provider, as well as we have internal capacities. On the agribusiness side is one of the key strategic pillars for the whole World Bank Group. There we have three main areas. The first area is enhancing productivity and efficiency. We focus on food security, waste reduction, and income enhancement. The second pillar is the promotion of inclusive development. We focus on smallholder farmers, women, nutrition, and risk management. And the third pillar is the support of environmental and social standards. On the agriculture sector, we work with the whole value chain, and we provide financial and risk management products, advisory services and technical assistance, and support for environmental and social services. On the way that we work in three main ways. One, we work with medium and large agribusiness companies. They can be local or international, and this is because of the size. But also our key aim is to reach smallholder farmers and small SMEs that they deal in the agri sector. And we do that working through local partners. And the local partners that we work with, they are either local intermediaries, again, local international or local agribusinesses, or we work with financial institutions, again, mostly local financial institutions that can be banks, microfinance institutions, leasing companies, etc. And as I mentioned, we work on the advisory services for the financial sector. We work with banks to help them improve their skills on how to lend to farmers. And also we provide technical assistance to producers to improve their technical and financial and managerial skills. Why coffee? Coffee remains one of the vital commodities among emerging markets, and particularly among coffee-producing countries. It's a vital commodity for several East African and Central American economies. The production is overwhelming smallholder-based, so there is a lot of important social impact here. But also we recognize that there are significant value-adding opportunities to improve the sustainability of the whole value chain, to improve yields, quality, and also to improve good practices. These are some data from the FAO, where shows that coffee still remains an important commodity in exports in emerging markets globally, but particularly in emerging markets, and in coffee-producing countries is the number 3 now most important source of export revenues. As I mentioned, we work with the full range. We work from the production, the field production, all the way to roasting and distribution. And we work with important partners. You can see some of the companies. This is not the whole list, of course. It's just selected examples of companies that we have worked along the various stages of the value chain in coffee. We have identified certain key issues in the coffee sector, from the aging of plantation of coffee plants and the need for replanting, to the need for working capital, to low farmer productivity, to certain disease issues like La Roya in Central America, the cyclicality of the markets, the increased demand for traceability and improved environmental standards and certification, the fragmentation of the supply chain, and the environmental issues in production and processing. And we try to offer various solutions that they are based on provision of short and long-term financial products, and we try to do that depending on the local conditions, and there is a lot of customization. And of course, the technical assistance that we offer along with the financial services. This is again a number of projects that we have worked with partners in various countries. You can see we cover pretty much the globe. We cover from Latin America to Africa to Asia. And again, this is it's a sample of projects. And you can see various stakeholders, from financial institutions to agribusinesses, either local agribusinesses or large multinationals in the coffee. The key lessons that we have learned from the various coffee projects so far is the number one lesson is that you need to form partnerships. We cannot do everything on our own. So we needed to engage with the real sector, with international traders, with local companies, with roasters, and of course with farmers, smallholder groups of farmers. And also we need, along with the financing, to provide technical assistance. Financing actually, it's not a means to an end, but financing is to promote the adoption of better practices, to improve yields, to improve quality, productivity, and promote environmental and social risk management across the whole value chain. So, combining technical assistance with financing is a very key lesson that we have learned. Also, another important lesson is that we need to work with banks and other financial institutions in coffee-producing countries to improve their skills, to understand better the sector, and in order to enable them to lend more to coffee producers. We are also, in our projects, we look at competitive production costs, quality of products, and we try to promote good practices and standards, improve the standards for sustainable production. I'm going to end with an example of a current project that we have in Ethiopia. This is a 3-year, $10 million revolving guarantee facility to selected banks in Ethiopia in order to provide on lending to coffee cooperatives in Ethiopia. We are working with close to 70 cooperatives in Ethiopia that they have received technical assistance on how to improve processing of coffee and invest in equipment that saves water during the washing of coffee. So the loans from the bank that we have provided a partial guarantee are to acquire efficient wet mills for processing cherry coffee into washed parchment coffee. And second is to meet the working capital needs of these cooperatives. Again, in this example, we work with the local bank because it's quite hard to work with each individual cooperative. So the local bank works as an aggregator of the financial demands from the various cooperatives. And again, the number of cooperatives, there are close to 70 cooperatives. I'm going to pass to my colleague Mona Sur to tell you what is the World Bank is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm representing the World Bank, which is the public sector arm of the World Bank Group. And most of our current work on coffee is actually embedded in our broader agricultural sector engagements in the countries that we work on. Much of what we do on coffee at the moment can basically be summarized in 4 thematic areas. As both Roy and Panos have mentioned, that we place a lot of importance on raising productivity of coffee farmers. And increasingly, our focus is on climate-smart agriculture and on improving the enabling environment. So here, we're talking about strengthening the sector policies as well as the institutions working on coffee. We then also focus quite strongly on linking farmers to markets and strengthening value chains. And a little bit later in the presentation, I will give you a more concrete example from a project that we're working on currently in the Pacific. Reducing risk and vulnerability is extremely important as well. And here, once again, in addition to promoting good risk management strategies for the coffee sector, we're increasingly focusing on aspects related to gender in coffee as well as nutrition. And finally, on enhancing environmental services and sustainability. And placing a great deal of emphasis these days on promoting landscape approaches for coffee. And here I'm talking about looking at the coffee landscape in terms of improving watershed management, promoting biodiversity, and promoting shade-grown coffee in many instances. For the World Bank, our primary point of engagement is with the national governments for our member countries, and we provide support for national programs as opposed to the IFC, which is directly dealing with the private sector. And much of our support is through a combination of analytical work and technical assistance, but also actual lending for investment projects as well as budget support. Our investment project finances is primarily loans to governments, and sometimes a combination of loans and grants. And the development policy lending in the form of budget support is really to support instances where there are coffee sector policy reforms or improvements for coffee sector institutions. And of course, our approach is differentiated across the countries we work in, and quite often we work in partnership with other development partners in our lending operations. Here's a brief summary of what we are currently doing in coffee. As you will see, much of our work, and I apologize for the small font on this slide, but much of our work right now is in Latin America in terms of our lending operations. And as Roy mentioned, we've been working very heavily on these productive partnerships and productive alliance. It's a model that emerged from work in the 90s in Colombia, and that has been scaled up across the region, but also to other parts of the world. We're also doing some work in Mexico on mainstreaming biodiversity protection in productive landscapes and coffee supply risk assessment. At present, we have a fairly heavy engagement in coffee in Vietnam. We've recently worked on the coffee rejuvenation strategy in Vietnam and provided support for their new coffee coordinating board, as well as scaling up sustainable production practices. And we have a forthcoming project that's in preparation that promotes good agricultural practices through credit lines for coffee producers. We have a fairly large project right now in Papua New Guinea, and this focuses on smallholder coffee, looking at issues of productivity, sustainability, as well as sector institutions. In Africa, at present, probably our most significant engagement is in Burundi. We've been working on a global environmental facility funded project on mainstreaming biodiversity protection. But we are also heavily engaged in coffee sector policy dialogue and sector reforms, and are preparing a new standalone investment for coffee. We've also been supporting and facilitating a lot of South-South exchange. So here we're talking about knowledge sharing between countries, and we have some ongoing work right now between Burundi, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Colombia. And finally, we also do work that's sort of cross-cutting at the global level, and things like the work that Roy has been doing with the ICO, but we've also worked on some price risk management training. In terms of how to access World Bank financing, well, our direct lending goes to governments through loans and grants. From there are various ways in which different coffee sector stakeholders can access these funds, and it really depends on the details of the project. But many of our current projects working on coffee, a lot of the support goes through grants or matching grants to private sector farmers, non-government organizations, as well as other institutions working on research in the coffee sector. Probably, I would say 70 to 80% of our projects on coffee right now have been built around this model of productive partnerships. And basically, there are four essential building blocks for this model. First is really organizing farmers, and we've heard about the importance of aggregation. And here we either work to strengthen existing producer organizations or help create new producer organizations. The second element then is really helping to link these producer organizations with the market, so linking them to the processors, to the buyers, and other service providers. We also provide support, and typically through matching grants, for investment in production and marketing. And finally, a very important component, which is the complementary technical assistance, both for the smallholder farmers, other actors in the supply chain, as well as the sector institutions. So just to give you a more sort of concrete example of what we've been doing in Papua New Guinea, we have a fairly large project on smallholder coffee farmers. It's about $34.5 million at present. It started in 2010 and will continue till 2019. And we are engaged in this work jointly with IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and the European Union is also involved in the cocoa component of this project. The project provides matching grants to partnerships through a competitive process, and typically a partnership comprises of a lead partner, which is an exporter, a processor, or an NGO. The partnership also has a large number of co-partners, typically, which are various service providers and groups of farmers, so about 300 to 1,500 smallholder farmers. And these are typically farmers that have less than 5 hectares of land, but most of them are much smaller than that. And we provide support for upgrading, for replanting and infilling. We're really focused on productivity, and we don't support sort of expansion of coffee area as such. We provide certification, improved processing, as well as sort of post-harvest management and support for the implementing agency, which is the Coffee Industry Corporation, as well as supporting strengthening the sector policies. One of the important parts of this project as well is really focusing on the associated infrastructure for the smallholder coffee farmers. And a lot of them are located in fairly remote areas with very poor roads, so there's also investment associated in terms of improving road maintenance. So what's been achieved so far? We currently have about 19 partnerships ongoing on coffee with about just under 14,000 farmers, and the target is by 2019 that we will have about 30,000 coffee farmers involved. A lot of the activities today has been in terms of helping the rehabilitation process of these coffee gardens. A lot of nurseries, some main nurseries and satellite nurseries have been constructed. Groups have applied for certification and some have been certified. A large number of farmers have received training both on the agronomic practices as well as post-harvest management. And as I said earlier, we really want to support women coffee farmers. Women coffee farmers in Papua New Guinea do quite a lot of the work on coffee. And we've made an effort under the project to make sure that the project activities are inclusive and enable the women farmers to avail of project support, but also ensure that a lot of the training that's provided under the project for coffee farmers actually meet the needs of women farmers and are tailored to meet the needs of women farmers. And we've also done quite a lot of work actually in terms of improving extension services, and here again really trying to get more women involved in coffee extension. And that's sort of been an uphill challenge, but I think there's a lot more work to be done in that area. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much to Juana Barantes, who is the head of the SME Finance Advisory, the IFC, and Mona Sur, the Lead Agriculture Economist of the World Bank, for their very insightful, useful, and to the point presentations. So thank you. They're very useful for us. We have a last minute situation that the representative of the African Development Bank could not join us today. So we're going to move straight to the Asian Development Bank with Naomi Chawkin. Chawkin,
that's good.
Chawkin,
Yep.
that's good. With the Resident Director General for the European office based in Frankfurt, in Germany.
Good morning. First, let me say I'm delighted to be here, and I was very grateful for the remarks of the Secretary to provide some background. Our Vice President, one of our Vice Presidents, I think many of you may know very well, Lakshmi, right? Called and asked me if I would be willing to go and make this presentation. I was actually in Asia for 20 years until I came and took this post about 3 years ago. And I said, Lakshmi, are you kidding? I'll be delighted. I can't wait to try all the different coffee. I'm sure that will be here. And I wasn't disappointed outside, but I'm still wondering how much coffee I can drink and still function this afternoon. But there's still more I want to try. I do want to talk to you about coffee in Asia. We do have many important coffee countries in the region. And I have to acknowledge that we have discussed the potentially transformational impact of coffee for an economy. But we're really just starting a deeper engagement in Asia in the coffee industry. More generally, our agriculture-related investment is about $2 billion a year. This is directed towards things like water systems for irrigation, infrastructure to connect smallholders for rural feeder roads to bigger roads and more directly connecting producers to markets, and also microcredit. Okay, that will help small farmers finance rural services, and especially similar to the World Bank, mostly focused on women or supporting women, engagement on women. But for the coffee investment specifically, I'd like to talk about some of our work in Laos. And I didn't make a PowerPoint because we really don't have a lot. We have a couple of small projects in Laos, but I think they're quite good ones. So I'm delighted to talk about them. We're also working with EFAD, and if anyone from EFAD is here, I just want to say thank you for cooperation in the agriculture area. We're working on value chains, linking 56,000 households in southern Laos with marketing opportunities. And the way we look at it more, and I think Lakshmi talked about this the last time she was here, is how do we use public-private partnerships more effectively? And one of the things that we've done in Laos is actually to work with community participation in these private-public partnerships. So that way we've worked on supporting a decentralization in the Laos coffee industry. The way it works is that provincial and district governments have invested in the establishment in this project of 4 organic coffee value chain sub-projects. We're working with them to provide quality inputs, technology transfer, matching funds, and institutional capacity building at the local level for local companies, communities along the value chain. Now, to respond directly to one of the questions that was asked of me before I got here is what has worked. And for us, I can say that the development of organic coffee chains supported by the project has improved the livelihood of more than 3,500 coffee farming households in the district so far. But when we talk about specifics, let me go down a little bit more granular. The project was financed for a little under 37 million US dollars. 20 million was provided by the Asian Development Bank to the government of Laos as a grant. 15 million was provided from IFAD to the government of Laos as a grant, and the remainder of which was provided by the government of Laos itself. Now, the project has worked to train farmer groups on soil nutrient management for coffee production, and the best yield achieved by smallholders in the project exceeded 1.6 tons per hectare. I'm an economist, I'm not an agricultural economist, so I'm just double checking with these figures to make sure I get them correct. In terms of profit, this equates to a change from $900 per hectare to $3,200 per hectare. Quite significant. We're delighted by this project. This project has also enabled the processing and storing of harvested coffee at farm gate by establishing coffee production groups, more training on primary processing, and storage facilities managed by the production groups. These investments generated more cash income for farmers through value adding to the producers, as well as increasing the farmers' ability to bargain with larger producers. Farmers no longer needed to rush to sell unprocessed red coffee beans within 24 hours of harvesting. This resulted in higher prices and the option to dry and store processed coffee for longer periods and sell when the market prices are higher. And I have to say, I was just reading 2 days ago in the Financial Times that the farmers in the Netherlands are doing the exact same thing with their apples. Since the blocking of exports to Russia, they're storing their pears and not, and this kind of practice in the third world seems revolutionary to these farmers, but it's something that's practiced worldwide and used worldwide for farmers. Access to local markets and export markets in Europe for the organic coffee is managed by the farmers' associations, an arrangement involving local coffee company with project support. Now, how finance is accessed. The project established revolving funds for producer groups to increase access to finance. The private sector also supports farmer groups in accessing commercial financing, the use of certification or guarantees, and supporting the development of business plans. It also provides some matching funds. In addition to the project specifically, we also provided technical assistance. And again, I think it's similar to a model used by the World Bank. This isn't that different. Farmer training, the use of high quality inputs, and extension advice. There are 4 areas basically. We'll call it essential technical support, and those are things like the training, the high quality inputs, and the extension advice. Second area is institutional support. That's group and cooperative formations, business linkages with private companies, and financial support required to establish commodity value chains in this model. And a second project, and this is a small pilot that we're just working on, and again, it's in Laos. We have a paperless trading pilot system, and what we're trying to do is actually work with exporters and their partners overseas to do paperless certification. Now, the pilot on this has been somewhat successful. We haven't expanded it that much, but it's been able to save about $200 for smaller shipments of coffee. So we think the possibility of extending it to different countries or even more broadly in Laos is possible. I can talk about that, but the last bit I want to mention is actually on the food security bit. When we think of our support for coffee, it's within a broader scope of agriculture and within a broader scope of what do we need to do in a specific country. So in food security, which is a big issue in Asia in particular, we have a multi-sector approach to upgrade the entire food system, and this is especially true in ASEAN. After the rice crisis that we had about 2 years ago, we had another one about 10 years before that. There's a whole new area about food security in Asia that's being managed by ASEAN. ADB's investments were approximately $900 million, a little under $700 million in loans, and almost $200 million in grants, and another almost $40 million in technical assistance. So apart from investing in water and rural infrastructure, we support a bunch of initiatives, such as introducing storage technologies, cold storage for just drying, and also cold storage, designing weather index insurance as a risk mitigation tool, and special logistics for perishable goods. And I think I want to leave it there, but I have 2 comments. One, I have tried the coffee from the World Bank Papua New Guinea project. Thumbs up on that one. And if there's someone here from Timor-Leste, I went to an amazing coffee project a few years ago in Timor-Leste, and I thought it was World Bank's, so I didn't see it on your list. So I'm wondering who, I know some international investor is helping with it. I was wondering who it is. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. And now we're going to have Mr. Parminder Singh, Managing Director at interim at the Common Fund for Commodities, address the ICO. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. And I'd like to thank ICO for inviting us today, especially to be present with other financial partners. We have been coming in the last 20 years, so we have been partners with ICO for long. It's nice to see that many other institutions are equally involved in it now. My presentation will be a little different because some of the things that I talk about are already known to this audience. So I'm going to skip quite a few slides. Like one, we are an intergovernmental financial institution established only for commodities. Our main function is to finance measures in mitigating the vulnerability of commodity producers. How do we do that? One is exposure to volatility and enhance the capacity to cope. All our projects are structured around commodity value chains. We have funded about 370 projects only in commodities. We don't do infrastructure, we don't do anything else, we only from farm to consumption, that's what we finance. We financed about total of 750 million, out of which about 300 has come from the common fund, and coffee is done about 40 projects. Our projects are small. They're not large projects. Our projects are duration of 5 to 7 years, costing about 3 to 4 million, out of which we give about 50%. Our partners are mainly ICBs. We used to work only with ICBs and give mainly grant projects. For the last 2 years, there's a change in pattern, and now we are more into recycling of our funds. Our project partners range from private sector to international organizations, and as I said, we fund about 50%. And our range of instruments is flexible. We are not very rigid about it. It can be loans, it can be grants, it can be returnable grants, it can be equity. As I said, we work basically, whatever we do is to value chain. Identify the chain actors, identify the specific obstacles to it, and then identify the intervention that won't work. I'm going to skip all that because this we've done before. I'm going to skip quite a bit of it. The areas of support are from production to risk management. We support projects of various natures, and some of them have welcome examples where they worked, and not necessarily in coffee, but how we learn from other products for coffee also. Partner institutions, as I mentioned, we work with almost everybody, bilateral, multilateral, cooperative, producer organizations. Only thing is they should be in commodity value chains, and they should be in our member countries. They should have a proven track record, and they should be ability to invest in value chain themselves. They should have a clear plan focusing on developing and diversifying the production, expand markets, have technical and managerial capacity, and include social, economic, and environmental factors. Let's skip that. Yeah, what type of projects? What do we look at? One is it should be commodity orientation. If that is not there, we will not be funding it. The project should be innovative, but innovative in a very broad sense. It's not that we're funding research and development, we've done that also in past. But basically taking anything new to a new country, a new product, a new market, or transferring technology from one country to the other is what we like to support. It should have a development impact, and it should be financially sustainable. It should be cost effective, and the institution should have track record. Okay. Now, as I said, till now we used to give grant assistance, but last 2 years, 3 years, when we looked at the range of institutions that are working in development assistance, we find there's been a tremendous change in development assistance. The traditional bilateral and multilateral cooperation has also shifted. The focus has shifted, the depth has shifted, and the type of intervention that has been supported. We find that a lot of new institutions and countries are available in development assistance now. There are philanthropic institutions now, there are social impact investors, there are global vertical funds, and there are also public finance available for climate change. We find that there's a lot of money available in domestic resources, and we're trying to integrate our assistance along with the domestic financial mobilization. The new landscape includes a number of foundation and non-governmental organizations. We've been working with them, we're working social impact funds now. We find that working social impact funds enables us to reach the last mile, and also able to build a coalition of partners on which we can have domestic partners, we can have international partners, and we can have multilateral financial institutions supporting. The impact investment funds are the social impact funds which are not looking for very high returns. Somebody mentioned root capital here some time back, and other institutions we're working with. Actually, we're working with other institutions in which investors are putting in money, basically targeted towards agriculture financing in third world. Now, what is as the World Bank mentioned right in the beginning, what type of finance are we looking for? Post-harvest finance is easily available most of the times. The moment the goods are secure, you can get it. Pre-harvest finance, crop loans, to a certain extent, yes. Long-term patient capital, unfortunately, is the most difficult one, where the access is just not available. And this is one area where we find very difficult to get partners to support it. We find that the lines of credit don't move, the revolving funds don't revolve, they remain static for a very long time. because of the inherent risks involved in the whole thing, and institutions are not willing to go the last mile because the cost of it is very high. Each one of these lending comes with own difficulties. It's the last mile that's a problem, and the cost of delivery that's the highest. But none of the international financial institutions, none of the large banks know the clients. The clients are very far off, and you need an intermediary. And intermediaries also come with a very mixed bag. Some are good, some are established record, and some require a lot of capacity building before you can do that. You also find that certain type of finance is available. Available sugar, available cotton, available rubber. So where the aggregation is possible, where it's possible to trap the revenues, money is available. But the moment you cannot trap it, then it becomes very difficult. Now, what preconditions must exist, or what confidence building measures need to be put in place to make sure the money goes where it is required? As somebody said, and we also say, finance is a question of availability and affordability. The difficulty in the third world is lack of titles, construction, lack of history, and becomes very difficult for all of us to deal with small loans. Okay. Where will the finance go? And because coffee is competing with others, coffee is not the only one. There are other sectors, like you find that in Malawi and other places that you can get money for maize, you can get money for something else, but you may not get money for horticulture products. Because there's a very market for it. There are public institutions working in it who are providing the necessary confidence and support through policy making. Securing good quality produce from smallholder farmers is not a choice. We have to do it because most of the world production is in small farms. It's not in large farms. Producers are there in it for long haul. Processors are in the long haul. The service providers who move in and out. Transporters, warehouses, financiers, they're not wedded to either coffee or to chocolates. They'll go where there's returns, they'll go where the money is available, they'll go where it's secure. Now, what can be done? And that's what we find interesting. One is creating databases. Information technology is coming very handy. We find that in maize in Malawi, that small holders with 1 ton, half a ton sitting dispersed in various places, if they know who is looking for what quality where, they're able to take them to the warehouses, aggregate it into truckloads, and move the goods. Recording history, financial services, that's very important. Contract farming is working in some areas. It's working in rice, it's working in maize, but not so much in coffee. We don't have that in coffee, but it's definitely in the food crops. It's working. It's also working in horticulture crops. Strengthening cooperatives. We all would like to work with producer organizations, we like to work with cooperatives, but we find that cooperatives are by and large, there are governance issues, there are capitalization issues, and there's also an issue of social cohesion in them. Wherever we find that there's social cohesion, where the policy is very clear, things do work. But many places we find that they're also very politicized and difficult to work. They work very well in Latin America, but they don't work so effectively in Africa and quite a few places. We also looked at the possibilities of raising bonds specifically directed towards a particular investment, let's say cocoa or coffee. Yes. We find that there is an interest in it. People are willing to put in money for bonds. They're willing to put in that. But the question is title, legal framework, and then also the ability to establish a framework by which you can control the finances, you can control the goods, and you can track and have them in markets. Sustainability funds that come with grants, at least the common fund finds that it's more and more difficult to get this money. There are very few angel investors and donors. General appetite is not there. This is something that we appeal to all governments, because all governments do get a lot of revenues from the commodities. They need to come forward and share the risk and provide guarantee capital. We find that the governments are not they are very proactive when it comes to revenues are concerned, when the export taxes are concerned, but when it comes to the sharing of risk and providing any sort of support in it, we find that there's a lot of reluctance in governmental funding. Financial institutions, by and large, insist on collateral-based lending. And my question to all the banking institutions is, what will you do with those collaterals? If the lending goes bad, you will hold a whole lot of assets which will not be invested. I think we need to get more and more into cash-based lending. We need to get into partners that are available down below, who can monitor it, look at the individual farmers, individual cooperatives. There's an institution I don't really heard about, it's Scope Insight. I think actually working with them now. We started working with them many years back. Idea was, as we have certification for products, we should also have a certification for management and finances of institutions. Now, this Scope Insight, an institution, is doing an independent assessment of cooperatives, of producer organizations, based on the management structure, repayment capacities, and the past history, and putting this database for a price for anybody to access, especially the banks to access, so that they don't have to do due diligence themselves. Somebody has done the due diligence initially, and then they can move on from that. And I think there's a lot of potential in this, and I see a lot of future in this sort of databases, independently verified databases being available. But as I said, it's still in a very early stage. I think about 500 or 700 institutions have been covered, but the database is a long way to go. Other area that we find very interesting now is social impact bonds. We are trying one now. That's basically Ashanka coffee growers in Peru, in which the benchmark has been established for production, incomes, and now we say, okay, if this incomes go up by this much in X number of years, production goes up by this amount in X number of years, then the common fund will pay to the institution implementing it $200,000 the cost of the project. If the benchmarks are not achieved, then somebody takes the risk on that. So we find that the institutions are coming forward to say, okay, we will deliver these outputs, given that if you promise that the money will be paid to us. The social impact bonds is one area I think we'd like to talk to other institutions here. Would they be interested in that? What we have learned over time is what matters is precise targeting against constraints. When we have precise targeting, we have good partners, we know what we are doing, and there's no, we are successful. And this is like production, but the constraints there, marketing, capacity building, financing. And capacity building needs to be done as a public good, while others be the possibility of getting returns of that. And I think I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a great presentation, and I'm sure very useful for all the members. Now we're going to have Mr. Ricardo Vargas del Valle, who is a senior specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB. And welcome him because he happens to be a fellow Colombian. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be part of this consultative forum. Even though my presentation is in English, as you can see, I feel more comfortable speaking Spanish. So if you allow me, I will do it in Spanish. Well, el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo fue creado en el año 1959, básicamente para ayudarle a los países de América Latina a financiar sus programas de desarrollo. Ahora son más de 48 países, de los cuales 26 es el número de países de la región que pueden recibir préstamos de esta institución. 12.000 millones de dólares serlo el monto anual que estamos prestando en los últimos 3 años. El 90% de estos recursos van a préstamos a los gobiernos. El 10% de estos recursos se financian vía el sector privado. Para agricultura, el banco de estos fondos le ha dedicado 15.000 millones de dólares desde el año 61 a su creación, que es el 9% del total de la cartera del banco. 3.000 millones de dólares es la cantidad de préstamos que hemos dado entre el año 2008 y 2014, los últimos 6 años, en un promedio de 6 operaciones anuales. Y más de $1 millón hemos aprobado del sector en el año 2011 para cooperaciones técnicas, que son donaciones, son grants. ¿Por qué nos interesa el desarrollo de la agricultura en América Latina? Bueno, rápidamente voy a pasar por acá. Ustedes conocen muy bien la realidad. Latinoamérica tiene abundantes posibilidades para expandir su producción agropecuaria. Es una de las esperanzas del mundo ávido de alimentos. Para el 2050, todos saben, la producción de alimentos debe incrementarse en más del 50% para alimentar a la población. Y América Latina es uno de los países que tienen más posibilidades de adaptar su riqueza de los recursos naturales que dispone. A Latinoamérica exporta casi el 14% del total de las exportaciones mundiales, de los cuales el 45% está en café, que es el interés de todos ustedes. Pero también hay otros commodities muy importantes como la soja, la soya, de Argentina, vivo en Argentina, pero soy colombiano. El 44% de carne y pollo, 70% de las bananas, bueno, ahí hay unas commodities. El 30% de la fuerza laboral en América Latina trabaja en el sector agropecuario, están en las zonas rurales, y el 75% de los pobres rurales dependen de la agricultura todavía como su fuente principal de ingresos. Todo esto hace porque nosotros tenemos como Banco de Desarrollo de la región estar muy interesados en tener apoyar los gobiernos en su proceso de desarrollo. En los años 80, como todos ustedes, en los finales, en los años 90, se hicieron una cantidad de reformas estructurales en la región que básicamente iban dedicadas a lograr una mayor estabilidad macroeconómica, a tener una mayor neutralidad en la política monetaria, en la tasa de cambio, a tener un régimen más abierto y menos que fuera no anti-exportador que teníamos en los años 60, 70, y un marco mucho más favorable para inversiones en el sector. Resultado de esto, es bien interesante verlo como gran cifra, antes de que se hicieran estas reformas en la región, los gobiernos y se financiaban principalmente de la extracción de recursos del sector. Principalmente los exportadores eran los que más sufrían con esto. Se extraían recursos, más de $10.000 millones se extraían anualmente del sector para apoyar las finanzas. Y de esto, después de esta reforma, se pasó a que en vez de sacar $10.000 millones, ahora los gobiernos apoyan con más de $5.000 millones, estoy hablando globalmente en la región de América Latina y el Caribe, para apoyar la agricultura y apoyar y compensar un poco toda esta extracción desarrollo que se hizo a costa del sector exportador, principalmente de commodities de agricultura. Todo eso resultó en un crecimiento del sector desde el año 90 al 2011, como pueden ver en el gráfico, que es bastante interesante. Aquí está cada barra representa uno de los países y la barra roja significa el promedio de América Latina y el Caribe, que este promedio es mayor que lo que se creció la comunidad económica de los países desarrollados, los países de la OECD. Y de esta forma se contribuyó mucho a reducir la pobreza en la región. Hay algunas cifras interesantes de cómo se disminuyó estos porcentajes, y lo que también es bien interesante destacar es que el agregado del crecimiento basado en la agricultura en América Latina fue 2.7 veces mayor o más efectivo en reducir la pobreza rural que las actividades no agrícolas. La contribución de la agricultura a la reducción de la pobreza. ¿Qué desafíos vemos nosotros en el banco para que tiene que enfrentar el desarrollo de la agricultura en América Latina y el Caribe? El primero es un bajo crecimiento en la productividad agrícola. Tenemos todavía tasas muy bajas de crecimiento. Las inversiones que hacemos en investigación y desarrollo, en innovación, en adaptación, en extensión, en mejoramiento de la productividad, dejan mucho que desear todavía. Ahí creemos que hay un campo enorme de inversión pública. Tenemos también una muy mala distribución de los beneficios del crecimiento, especialmente en las zonas rurales, que sigue teniendo la mayor cantidad de pobreza de la región. Y tenemos una vulnerabilidad al cambio climático muy fuerte, que tienen los estudios que se han mostrado. Quizás ustedes han tenido oportunidad de mirar más en detalle sobre el tema del café, pero los estudios muestran que realmente tenemos que hacer muchos esfuerzos en adaptación ante estos cambios. En el año 2008 el banco pasó un cambio estructural muy importante, un proceso de reordenamiento interno del banco, pero también de enfoques y cambios estratégicos. Y empezamos a trabajar una estrategia para apoyar la agricultura con un enfoque que era más tratando de buscar las ventajas comparativas que tiene cada país y apoyar una mejor asignación de recursos en cada uno de ellos, para evitar distorsiones que sean ineficientes en términos económicos. Tratar de lograr una mayor inclusión social. Este es un desafío que tenemos pendiente en la región, y tenemos que llegar a la mayor cantidad de agricultores pobres para que ingresen en una cadena virtuosa de desarrollo económico. Y buscar, obviamente, los mayores retornos en las inversiones. Razón por la cual fuimos trabajando en esos años, y el año pasado, en el 2013, se aprobó en el banco lo que llamamos un marco sectorial para la agricultura y el desarrollo rural. El banco se establece en forma de que tiene una reposición de capital cada vez que requiere que sus propias finanzas lo demandan así, y cuando se hace una reposición de capital, como fue la última en el 2011, los países miembros, los aportantes y los beneficiarios deciden una estrategia de utilización de esos recursos. En este caso, la última reposición de capital impuso más o menos unas estrategias y unas orientaciones como las que he señalado antes, de la inclusión social, reducción de la pobreza, la combate al cambio climático, una mayor integración regional. Y basado en eso, en agricultura y los recursos naturales, nos impusimos, dentro de ese alineamiento estratégico, un marco sectorial para el desarrollo de la agricultura. ¿Cuáles son los énfasis y las líneas de políticas generales que nosotros tenemos? Menciono esto quizás para que ustedes entiendan cómo funcionan estos bancos, que es algo similar a lo que mis colegas del Banco Mundial ya mencionaron antes, que es los préstamos con los gobiernos. Los gobiernos tienen sus planes de desarrollo, tienen sus estrategias y prioridades de inversión en función de sus propios diagnósticos. Con base en ellos, nosotros hacemos unos marcos estratégicos de intervención del banco, normalmente coincidiendo con los periodos de los gobiernos de turno, para alinearse con esos gobiernos, alineándonos a su vez con nuestras propias estrategias de la reposición de capitales y con nuestros marcos sectoriales de desarrollo más específicos por sector. Por supuesto, estaré con mucho gusto explicarle esto con mayor detalle a las personas que estén interesadas en ver cómo pueden acceder dentro de este marco general a que un proyecto determinado, una necesidad específica en alguno de esos países, de la región obviamente de América Latina, quiera llevar adelante para que el gobierno se interese y entre en este canal, en este circuito, que es un poco complejo, un poco pesado, burocrático, pero que se alinea en estos marcos estratégicos que menciono. El marco sectorial, el marco nacional de la estrategia del gobierno que corresponda, el marco de intervención del banco y el marco sectorial de políticas nuestro, que paso enseguida a explicar un poquito acá para el conocimiento de ustedes. El principal elemento que tenemos nosotros es tratar de eliminar obstáculos vía precios que distorsionen, para que los precios realmente lleguen, los productores se beneficien de los precios externos, los precios internacionales. En este sentido hemos hecho, apoyados reformas de política en los países, apoyando tratados de libre comercio, apoyando reformas de política en la agricultura que lleven a menos distorsiones en la asignación de recursos en el sector. El segundo punto es mejorar la efectividad, la cobertura y la calidad del gasto público rural, que vaya, digamos que promueva el crecimiento económico. En este sentido, en este gráfico que ustedes ven allí, está también por países, las barras son países. Lo que está en azul es la parte de los apoyos fiscales directos, que son políticas en las cuales gastan los gobiernos dinero para apoyar el sector. Y en verde están los gastos públicos dedicados a bienes públicos, carreteras, investigación, extensión, sanitarios. Ahí ustedes pueden ver un poco cómo en la región hay una distribución más o menos, pero prevalece el apoyo directo. El tercer punto de la estrategia es apoyar la provisión efectiva de servicios y infraestructura moderna para apoyar el sector. Asegure competitividad en largo plazo. Sabemos todos que los apoyos vía precios resuelven un problema de emergencia, resuelven problemas de momento cuando los precios están mal, pero no resuelve el problema de la productividad en el largo plazo. Entonces no hay que olvidarse nunca de esta ecuación tan básica del desarrollo económico. Los proyectos típicos que nosotros financiamos aparecen allí: caminos rurales, electrificación rural, irrigación, sistemas de innovación en la agricultura, investigación, desarrollo, problemas fitosanitarios, como mencionaba antes, sistemas de información y también el tema del acceso a la tenencia regularizada de la tierra. Y hacemos mucho énfasis en esta nueva estrategia en la evaluación de proyectos. Tenemos una tendencia a mejorar nuestros sistemas de evaluar los proyectos para determinar cuáles son efectivamente las razones por las cuales en algunos casos se tiene éxito y en otros no, y cuáles son los mecanismos por los cuales algún tipo de proyectos funcionan mucho mejor que otros, de aprender de todo eso. Tenemos mucha información, pero no siempre evaluada rigurosamente, y queremos mejorar muchos de esos aspectos. Y por último, no nos oponemos a ello tampoco, cuando es necesario, y muchas veces lo es, y se justifica adecuadamente, apoyar también sistemas de transferencia directa, apoyos directos. De hecho, muchos de los ejemplos que se han mencionado acá, y que yo voy a mencionar ahora también del caso nuestro, son proyectos en que se hacen matching grants o donaciones directas, aportes no reembolsables a los agricultores para ayudarles a disminuir sus riesgos y a entrar en las condiciones que de otra forma no pudieran obtener para capitalizar sus sistemas productivos. Este tipo de apoyos directos los focalizamos entonces en pequeños productores, obviamente, y buscamos que con esto eliminar restricciones de liquidez en los sistemas financieros rurales que funcionan muy precariamente en muchos de nuestros países. Como les mencionaba, entonces aquí tenemos algunos ejemplos de lo que nosotros hemos hecho en la última década para apoyar el desarrollo, en este caso de la caficultura, pero muchos de estos programas están inmersos en una área más general, no solamente para apoyar el café, el sector, sino también zonas rurales en las cuales el café es quizás muchas veces el más importante cultivo, por lo cual obviamente el sector se beneficia acá. Hay algunos ejemplos, está un modelo de intervenciones innovadoras para el sector cafetero en Colombia, que fue ejecutado por la Federación Nacional de Cafeteros entre el año 2006 y 2010. En Centroamérica, en Costa Rica, Honduras, Haití, Tenemos una serie de programas que están muy focalizados a esto que yo mencionaba, a apoyar transformaciones productivas, capitalización al interior de las parcelas o de los predios, de las fincas de los caficultores, recibiendo matching grants para desarrollar. Al mismo tiempo hay asistencia técnica involucrada en esto y obviamente mucha vinculación a mercados. Y muchas de estas prácticas que se promueven acá son para tener un enfoque de manejo con el medio ambiente mucho más sostenible. El combate a la roya está metido aquí dentro de estos proyectos también con mucha fuerza. Está el caso de Honduras y el caso de Pronegocios, que a través de asociativismo, que también se mencionó ahora, cooperativas que reciben y son agricultores que incursionan en las labor más adelante de la cadena para hacer su proceso de secado de café y venta el siguiente eslabón comercial. Igual en el caso de Haití. Y aquí estos últimos dos que aparecen en el gráfico, este regional, que es Conecom, esta es una facilidad que se aprobó recientemente en el banco, conjuntamente con el IFC, con el Fondo Canadiense para el climático, para el cambio climático, con el Global Agricultural Food Security Program, y en total este programa es de $100 millones. El banco pondrá 40 millones, digo pondrá porque es un esquema general de una iniciativa de financiamiento. La primera operación de esa iniciativa, que es muy interesante, se acaba de aprobar en julio pasado en el banco para Nicaragua, en el cual el banco financia 12 millones y en total se espera que se coloquen 30 en esta operación. Esta operación, esta iniciativa, lo que busca es, en asociación con el ECOM, que es este importante trader de café a nivel mundial, darle préstamos a los agricultores para hacer renovación de cafetales y para combatir la roya. Entonces aquí hay una inversión de largo plazo para aumento de productividad muy interesante. Ahora, esta es una ventanilla del banco, no es la de préstamos a los gobiernos. Esta es utilizando la que decía antes del sector privado nuestro, del banco. Y por supuesto va entonces con todo el tema de las garantías que se requiere esto, ya no son garantías soberanas con el país, sino que todo este esquema que se ha desarrollado para esto tiene el tratamiento como de una banca privada, parecido a nuestros colegas en el Banco Mundial. Y tenemos otras intervenciones que son de otro nivel, que son donaciones, que estas las manejamos con el Fondo Multilateral de Inversiones, el FOMIN, y también hay algunos ejemplos en Colombia, Costa Rica, Honduras, Haití, Venezuela. Hay uno regional, que son básicamente productos para generar conocimiento o inclusión de pequeñas y medianas empresas en cadenas productivas. Por supuesto, ahí están todas estas, hay algunas otras. Tendré muchísimo gusto en comentarlas con ustedes en los coffee breaks o en la tarde, por quien quiera, obviamente están nuestros datos. Pero nuevamente, la idea es, y entiendo que el propósito del seminario ha sido ese, que podamos entrar en mayor detalle de cómo ayudarles a ustedes a trabajar con sus gobiernos pertinentes, la forma de entrar con ideas, con proyectos, con iniciativas para acceder a los recursos del banco. El banco, como ustedes saben, es un banco de desarrollo en que la agricultura es uno de los sectores, como ya lo expliqué, que tiene muchas otras prioridades, hay muchos otros sectores compitiendo por los recursos que son muy limitados para las necesidades que hay en la región, y por lo tanto una buena aproximación, un buen conocimiento de estos mecanismos es vital para que ustedes, como representantes del sector cafetero y productores agropecuarios, puedan entrar a participar en esos recursos. Por último, quiero mencionar un par de elementos, en el tiempo que me queda, que pueden ser útiles, solamente lo quiero mencionar muy rápidamente. Uno es el AgriMonitor, que es una base de datos muy interesante que hemos creado en el banco, con base, siguiendo la metodología de la OECD, para establecer todas las políticas de apoyo a la agricultura en los países de América Latina y del Caribe. La base es bastante amplia, bastante buena, y es muy fácil entrar y conocer esto, una herramienta muy útil para hacer análisis comparados de política, análisis comparativos entre países o análisis al interior de cada país para ver cómo se está apoyando al sector. Y obviamente el sector cafetero es uno de los muy importantes, especialmente para mí como colombiano, es de fundamental importancia. Un profesor en Oxford me explicaba algún día que si uno quisiera entender la historia de Colombia, tenía necesariamente que entender la historia del café. Y por último, este otro mecanismo, este es un fondo de tecnología agropecuaria, se llama Fontagro, en el cual participan 15 países de la región, que es un fondo patrimonial con sus recursos, con los rendimientos que genera el fondo, se financian proyectos que apoyan integración de conocimiento, proyectos de investigación que beneficien por lo menos a 2 de los países miembros. Con esto se han financiado cerca de 80 proyectos en los últimos 15, 17 años, y muchos de ellos son de café. Hay unos muy interesantes. Ayer se mencionaba aquí el tema del genoma, con un proyecto de Fontagro, el BID y el café en Colombia. Se investigó también el genoma, parte del genoma del café arábigo. Entonces, dicho esto, estaré dispuesto y gustoso de compartir con ustedes mayores detalles para los que estén interesados. Muchas gracias.
Claro, muchas gracias. La verdad ha sido una presentación muy interesante. Very interesting presentations. I hope that it's been very useful to you. I want to encourage you again to really try to network and talk to all the representatives of these organizations. So far, the World Bank, the IFC, the Asian Development Bank, CFC, and IDB. Now we're going to have, after the 15-minute coffee break, we're going to have a panel discussion with government development agencies that also can be very, very useful, very interesting for all of us. We as Federation, Colombian Confederation, we work with many of them, and we can attest of how useful it is and how not always easy it is to access to the resources, but once you get there, it's very useful for the projects and it makes a difference. Quick admin announcement. We're gonna have a coffee break for 15 minutes. Please, let's try to keep it for 15 minutes. I know it's very short, but and we are many, so I hope that we can all of us have a cup of coffee. And lunch is not going to be an hour and a half. It's going to be 1 hour from 1 to 2. So we have more time for networking in the afternoon. Lunch is going to be served by the ICO. It's going to be a light lunch, basically sandwiches and something light. So I think we can do it in 1 hour. So thank you very much, and let's enjoy the coffee. Thank you.
Yeah, you did. Oh. Really?